Hello, welcome to Leadership Live with Anton Gunn. It's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you again. This week, we are continuing our conversation about the culture killers. This is a 4-part series where I'm laying out the 4 different types of ways that your culture can be murdered by these new trends in HR. And when I mean new trends, I've talked to you about silent sacking. That was the first week where people are literally taking the job away from their employees and making them quit, forcing them to quit. And it's a silent way to sack them. The second one we talked about was rage applying, that when you have built a culture that is so toxic and you mistreat people so badly that they literally decide that they're going to quit and they apply for 25 jobs in one day and tell everybody that they're applying for a new job. And then they rate you bad on Glassdoor. Like, I went through it in all detail. And so today, this week, is part 3 of Culture Killers. And this week, we're going to talk about something that is on the rise in every single workplace. I'm telling you right now, I've done about in the last, I want to say last 3 or 4 months, I've done, not 3 or 4 months, last 3 or 4 weeks, I've done 4 or 5 keynote speeches. And at the end of the keynote, someone always comes up to me in the back and they talk about what I'm about to share with you, that it is on the rise in every organization. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about toxic leadership culture, toxic leadership traits. So culture killer number 3 is toxic leadership. That we know the employees are rage applying and leaving the organization. Why are they doing that? Because of toxic leadership. We know that people's jobs are being taken away from them and duties are being pulled back and they're being left out of meetings. Why? Because of toxic leadership. So today, I endeavor to do 3 things in this video. Number 1, I'm going to lay out the 7 traits of a leader that are quietly killing your workplace culture. Quickly, I'm going to lay these traits out. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of real time of things that I've heard from client organizations or leaders in client organization that I know is happening real time. So I'm going to give you these traits. Hope you're not living them. Hope you're not operationalizing them. Hoping that you're not normalizing them. And then I'm going to give you some signs of this might be happening in your organization. And then I'm going to close it out with 5 things that I teach in my keynote presentations, that I share in my keynote presentations to help you to address toxic workplace culture if it's already happening. They can also help you to prevent it from happening if it's not there in your organization. So you need to buckle up because this one is going to be full of information and value-added ideas, content, frameworks, details that will help you to prevent this massive culture killer from destroying your organization from the inside out. And it starts with the 7 traits that are quietly killing your workplace. Here's the first one. The first trait that is quietly killing workplaces from their leaders is micromanagement. Now, when I say micromanagement, we all know what management is and how it's different from leadership. See, management is the person who wants to tell people when they go to lunch, make sure they knew what time they clocked in, make sure that they are not hanging around the water cooler having conversation, or that they're not erroneously in the Slack channel talking about stuff that has nothing to do with work. That's management. That's not leadership. But let me tell you what toxic management is. Toxic micromanagement or toxic management is micromanagement. And it manifests itself with the leader who wants to be involved in every single decision. Like, I had an organization that I was involved with, and I learned that before anybody could send anything out from the communications or marketing team, the CEO himself had to sign off on it. Now, I want you to think about that. You have a marketing team. They have skills and expertise in marketing. They have skills and expertise in communications. But before a press release goes out, before you put the final copy to the web designer for them to design the website, it all had to run through the CEO. And they were so meticulous in their micromanagement, they wanted to know what the font size was. Is this 12-point font or is this 11-point font? Why do we choose this font style? Like, look, you have a brand team and a brand style guy who are all experts. But if you're micromanaging to the point that you need to know the font size on some copy, you got bigger problems. And that problem is a toxic culture. Micromanagement. That's sign number one. Sign number two is what I like to call blame shifting. That this is a leader who does no wrong, that it's everybody else's fault. There's a reason why we couldn't meet the deadline is because everybody else is doing something wrong. You have a toxic leadership trait if you can never take responsibility or own the accountability for a project. That's trait number two. Now, here's trait number three is playing favorites in the office. Yeah, that's right. Someone who is always showing favoritism to certain people. How does it show up? Well, you got a team of 10 and certain people always get the holiday weeks off. Or like if a Memorial Day is coming up, they just happen to be able to get approved for the Friday off. But if you try to get approved for that Friday off, you can't never get it approved. They clearly have identified who their favorites are. I have a story about a healthcare system where there was a physician leader who would only invite certain other physicians to his home for dinner or to hang out on his boat, that you knew who his favorites were out the gate. Favoritism is a toxic leadership trait. Another toxic leadership trait, this is number 4, is inconsistency. Now, what do I mean inconsistency? I mean that you trying to figure out who's going to show up today. That you got one leader who shows up on Monday, but a different leader who shows up on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, if the big bosses are around, a new person shows up. That they're inconsistent with how they treat people, inconsistent with how they talk to people, inconsistent to the vibe that they bring into the office. At least that's what the young folks say. What's the vibes you got? What kind of vibe you giving off this week? Inconsistency is a toxic leadership trait. Now, here's number 5. If you have a leader who likes to control everything versus collaborate over things, that's a toxic leadership trait. I think I've shared this story before that I had an executive leader call me one time who told me that she was leaving an organization. And the reason why she was leaving the organization is because she was 2 levels below the CEO. So not a direct report to the CEO, but a direct report that directly reports to the CEO. And one day the CEO saw her in the hallway and asked her for a meeting. Said, I want to meet with you. I want to learn more about you, learn more about your work. So she schedules the meeting and it's on her calendar. Her boss then sees the meeting on the calendar with the CEO. And her boss comes in and says, why are you going to meet with the CEO? Well, I'm going to meet with the CEO because the CEO asked me to go to the meeting. Then her boss says, well, why wasn't I included on that email? I don't know. He wanted to meet with me. He didn't want to meet with you. This boss got so offended because he couldn't control the meeting. She did the meeting, and after the meeting was over with, he forbade her from ever taking another meeting with the CEO ever again. If the CEO calls you and asks you for a meeting, then you include me on the communication because I'm going to be the one to go and do that meeting. That's control. That's a control freak, if you ask me. I mean, why would you? I'm not even getting into explaining, but literally, that's a real life scenario that a leader wants to control everything. That's micromanagement too, but that really is about control. They're afraid of losing control. Number 6 kind of leads into that one. And that one is fear-based or fear-driven decision making. That because you're afraid of what somebody's going to say when you're not in the room, you now make a decision and say you can't go to any more meetings with the CEO. That's a fear-driven decision maker. Bad trait. And we're starting to see lots of more of that in organizations, particularly as we get to these uncertain times where people just don't know things. And so everybody's kind of afraid. So you're just making decisions out of fear. Not a good trait. And the last trait that is a problem, it's a toxic trait. And that is a leader who is emotionally unavailable for their team. Let me give you an example of a leader who is emotionally unavailable for the team. I know an organization that went through a round of layoffs. So just imagine you're on a team with 10 people. I always like using easy round numbers. You're on a team with 10 people, but because of austere times or budget cuts or some other things, that 4 people on the team have been let go. 2 were given packages to leave. The other 2's positions were eliminated. So you went from 10 down to 6. And it's the next week at work. And your boss in the staff meeting acts like nothing happened the week before. Okay, guys, now we got to get back on this project and we got deadlines to meet. We got things to do. And this is the best team in the world. So they literally given the toxic positivity mindset without understanding the emotions of what you and your other 5 colleagues are going through. 4 people who you were in the trenches with, that you would ride or die with for the last several years, are no longer there. But they're not showing any emotional intelligence or empathy about the fact that you just lost 4 colleagues, 4 people. It's like losing family members. People that you've worked with, you have some feelings and concern about them. You've gotten to know them over the years, and now they're gone, but yet your boss could care less. He or she has moved on. That is a trait that is going to kill culture. So let me recap these 7 traits, and let me tell you a little bit more about how you know if you might be this kind of leader. Trait number 1 is micromanagement. Trait number 2 is shifting blame to other people. Trait number 3 is showing favorites or playing favoritism in the office. Trait number 4 is inconsistency. Consistency. Trait number 5 is controlling everything over collaborating with people. Trait number 6 is living in a fear-driven culture. Fear-driven culture. And trait number 7 is being emotionally unavailable to your team. Those are the 7 traits that make up the bad framework of toxic leadership. Now, let me share with you if you might be in this boat. Maybe you don't think you are a micromanager, or you shift blame, or you pick favorites, or you're inconsistent, or that you make fear-driven decisions, or that you're emotionally unavailable. You might believe that you're doing a great job. But let me ask you these questions. Number 1, do you avoid feedback from your team? Or do you create an open space for your team to give you feedback? Do you lead a division where nobody is allowed to talk about what's going on? That you keep informational security. Information has to stay tight. If you're avoiding feedback, you don't let people share information. If you want to control every decision, font colors, where we go to lunch, what's on the menu of food, yeah, your team might come to you and say, hey, we're planning this big potluck lunch. I want to know, do you want Chinese? Do you want Mexican? or do you want to go with some American fare? They might ask you your opinion, but you should say, what do you think? I'm going to let you make the decision. You decide what's best, because you don't need to control that decision. And the last thing that you might be doing to show that you might be a toxic leader is that you have a lack of transparency and trust on your team. That if you're not being honest with people and open with people and vulnerable with people, you might be creating an environment that lacks transparency and lacks trust. Those are some things I want you to reflect on as a leader. Now, if you're an HR executive or you are in charge of an HR team in an organization, I want to lay out for you 5 things that I teach in my keynotes. I do this in presentations, real time, give people tangible, actionable things that they could implement tomorrow. I'm actually doing some of these not only from the stage, but I'm actually working with clients where I'm walking them through some of these strategies to avoid the things that kill your culture, to reduce this toxic leadership quotient in your organization, to reduce these habits down to zero. The reason why it's important, because it's all about maintaining an environment that you're going to help people to win, and they're going to help you to win. They're going to help your bottom line. They're going to raise the morale. They're going to keep the productivity high. They're going to keep the trust high. They're going to keep the engagement high because you've minimized these in your organization. So let me give you the 5 things you can do that if you want to minimize the culture killer of toxic leadership and silence these traits, eliminate these traits. Here are 5 things that I teach in my keynote presentations. Number 1 is you got to have a process of always asking for and receiving constant feedback. And you can do that, do 360 feedbacks. You can do 360 feedbacks. That's how you do it. So what is a 360 feedback? You want feedback from everybody who works above you, feedback from your peers, and the people who work below you. So let me give you a snapshot example of how you do that. So let's say you're an executive vice president, you're EVP. You report directly to the CEO. So you want to get some feedback on your performance from your CEO. That would be the first person in that chain. Then, if you're an EVP, you probably sit at the table with 2 or 3 other EVPs. You also want to include those 3 other EVPs and get feedback from them all about your performance, your habits, your behaviors, and how you show up. And then you want to look down in your organization to people who directly report to you and capture feedback from them. That's how you do a 360. Get feedback from everybody around you. Qualitative feedback and quantitative feedback. So a survey and some interviews. HR can help you to do this. Simple and easy. So that's the first thing. That's how you prevent and address this toxic culture, is a 360 feedback. The second thing you can do is provide every leader in your organization with emotional intelligence training. Like, I don't call my keynote presentations or my half-day presentations emotional intelligence training, but that's all I teach. Is I teach you how to be an emotionally intelligent leader. And the first thing you can do to be an emotionally intelligent leader is to know the people that you lead. And when I mean know the people that you lead, I'm talking about you got to know them. I'm talking about like just know your team cards, know them. You got to know your team. See, because if you know your team, you know what they're about. You know what makes them tick, what inspires them, what motivates them, what pisses them off. You know everything about them. And you can show some emotional intelligence once you know them, because you need to be showing them that you care about what's important to them. That's the second thing you need to be doing, is getting some emotional intelligence training. I'm happy to provide that if it could be of value to you. Now, here's the third thing you need to do. You need to normalize vulnerability in your organization. I tell my audience from the stage, nobody in this room has an S on their chest. They weren't born on the planet Krypton. They weren't born on Paradise Island. They don't fly an invisible jet. They don't have a lasso, and they don't have magic bracelets to block bullets with their hands. There's no Superman and there's no Wonder Woman in the organization. We're not inhuman. We don't have superpowers. We're human beings who make mistakes, who have faults, and who fail. And the best kind of culture is an organization where leaders practice vulnerability, saying the words, I screwed up. I made a mistake. I was wrong. I didn't have the right answer. I don't have the answer at all. I don't know. Those are normalized terms that demonstrate vulnerability. That is exactly what you need to be doing if you want to prevent toxic leadership culture in your organization. You got to normalize vulnerability. The next thing you need to do is to be real clear about your communication strategies. You have to have executive communication strategies that meet people where they are. You got to have them. If you don't, you're not going to win. So when I tell people to make sure that you have effective leadership strategies, you got to literally put people in the environment where everybody knows that communication is the most important thing. Communication is the most important thing. You got to communicate through writing, through presentations, through email, through chat message, and in-person town halls. Constant, effective executive communication. You got to have it. If you don't have it, you're not going to win. You're not going to stop this bad culture from taking over. And the last thing that you need to do, if you want to prevent or stop toxic leadership from taking over your culture and your organization, is that you have to live your company's values in action. And what do I mean, live your company's values? Just what are do you know your company's values? I had a client that I worked with a year ago. We were doing a lot of talking around what they were trying to drive in the organization, trying to drive psychological safety in the organization. And then they made it a point to tell me that they went through a long process to shape their values, that they came up with these great values that they really wanted all of the leaders to know, all of the leaders to own, all of the leaders to live by, right? So I said, okay, great. I don't need to talk about values because they already own them. They already know them and live by them. I just need to reinforce them. So I step on stage to deliver this presentation in front of 400 leaders at this organization. And I casually said to the audience, okay, I got some stuff that I'm going to teach you today. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recite the company values in order. So everybody, on the count of three, when I say count of three, we're going to say the 4 values in order. 1, 2, 3. It was crickets in the room. This room of 400 leaders who all are people managers couldn't recite the values of the organization. They couldn't. Most of them didn't know any of them, but some of them were chanting out words that were the wrong words. Definitely not in the order that they were laid out on the website, laid out in their brochures, laid out in all of the pre-materials that they gave me. The leaders didn't know the values. So if they don't know the values, how are you going to live them in action? How are you going to live? Like, I'll give you an example. There was an organization I knew, their values were compassion, teamwork, diversity, accountability, and innovation. Compassion, teamwork, diversity, accountability, and innovation. So if those are your values words, how do you show compassion to the team that you lead? Teamwork. How are you demonstrating teamwork? If diversity is a value, how are you demonstrating diversity of thought, of perspective, of function? And yes, race, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation too. How are you showing that in the work? If your value is accountability, how are you demonstrating accountability? If your value is innovation, how is everybody showing up and being innovative? They weren't. So they weren't living their values in action. But if you want to prevent toxic culture, you have to find a way to live your values in action. So let me recap those bottom 5. Number 1, 360 feedback is totally important. Emotional intelligence training is what you should be doing. Normalizing vulnerability is what you should be doing. Executive communications or effective executive communications is what you should be doing. And number 5, you need to be demonstrating your values in action, behavioral based values. So there you have it. That's the culture killer. Number 4 is toxic leadership. The 7 things I laid out that are killing your culture, but more importantly, the 5 things that I gave you at the end on how you prevent it. So I hope this has added value to you. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And we'll see you back here next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel for Leadership Live with Anton Gunn. Have a fantastic day.